This is Tim Tucker, AE6LX from the Worldwide Radio Forum at www.worldwidedx.com. I'm here with Matt Zillmer, W6NIA, who is going to talk to us today about the Elecraft K3 transceiver and the new P3 Panadapter. Matt is one of the early adopters of the K3 and has one of the very first few production runs of this, so he's had it from 2007.
That's right.
So he's had plenty of time with the rig, and he's going to tell us what makes this rig unique and also introduce us to the new P3 that just started shipping this week. Go ahead.
Okay, we're going to take a look at general features of the radio. That's the important thing here is that the K3 is not a new architecture, it's just been done properly. And primarily that's a receiver function. In the case of the K3, it's quite different from the K2 for those of you that are interested in the difference. K3 uses roofing filters to actually reject, I would call it IF band interference from adjacent signals. And I mean, it's a roof, but it's also a fence. It puts up a fence against those signals. And when we actually look at the way the radio does this, you've got a signal next to you, 2 kilohertz away at 50 dB over S9. And you're listening to somebody at S9, and guess what? He ain't there anymore. That signal's missing. You won't see any descents, you won't see any blocking. That's typical. You can cause the radio to block, but you have to get that other signal in the passband of the roofing filter. Once you do that, it's just like any other receiver. Qualities are mostly, what I'm going to describe is mostly qualities in the receiver. And we're kind of looking at it from a distance here right now. But right now we're on CW on 40 meters. I believe the contest is North American QSO Party, CW portion. And later on you'll get to see the P3 in action working with the K3. It's a collaborative effort between them. Very important. You can't do one without the other, but you can operate the P3 with other radios. You can operate the K3, of course, without the P3.
So you can use the Panadapter with other transceivers. It's not dependent or unique to the K3 in itself.
That's correct.
Okay.
And Wayne and Eric were very clear about this. They didn't want to be limited just to the K3 because that's, for them, it's a business issue. But for the amateur community, it's great because the P3 is not an expensive Panadapter. It's quite affordable. That's important.
So describe for us for a few minutes what all the features and options that you have in your K3.
If describing it would be easiest if I start with where I started and where we're at now. I think all K3s are a work in progress. So I started with the K310, basic 10 watt K3 with a single filter in it for the receiver, for the roofing filter that is, and moved immediately to the 100 watt power amplifier, mainly because it was contest season. I really needed it. Added more roofing filters at that time, or right around that same time. Went to the general purpose bandpass receiver, the receiver filter, which is used for shortwave broadcast, AM, whatever you like. Very quickly after that, I added smaller features like the DVR, and then there was several of those. And then I added the sub receiver when that became available, and that took a whole new set of roofing filters. So there's some little small amount of expense involved in this too. And then more recently, I've added the 2 meter transverter. I actually helped work on that at the tail end of its development. And then today, of course, the P3 Panadapter. So that's the capsule history of it. There's more detail, but that's probably what you want to know.
How would you describe the build process to somebody who's never seen one of these before, building one up, and what the experience is going to be like for them?
Well, there's really 3 major points to make. The first thing is everything fits together perfectly. All right. When I built mine, everything wasn't all ready yet. I was an early adopter, so there were nits and little bits and pieces of problems here, but I've been through your radio, for example, and it fits like everything like a glove to the next piece. And I've seen several others in between my first build and this time, and they've all the latter day radios are much better for fit. I've actually tested the K3 to the Clifton Lab specs using pretty precise equipment we have where I work, and it meets the specs that Wayne said. It actually exceeds them in some respects, which Clifton has actually been better at detailing than I have. Lastly, it's a joy to operate, and we'll probably do some of that in a couple of minutes and just kind of show off the features of the radio. But one thing I want to make clear is I don't work for Elecraft. Okay, so this is a
Right, I understand.
this is just amateur to amateur, so we understand that. That's also for the audience.
Of course. All right, well let's take a look at the rig.
All right. Well, right now we're on 40 meter CW, and I believe we're in the middle of the North American QSO party. I've been following it all day, but I haven't been able to participate because of other commitments. Right now we've got the filter open wide up. We're on a 2.8 kilohertz filter, looking at a variety of signals, and we're all used to hearing this on CW, where you hear 4, 5, 6 signals in the passband. One of the K3's, I would say, identifying properties is that it can reject pretty much whatever you want in terms of receive. And in the case of CW, that's very important because you can squeeze a lot of signals in a small bandwidth. So the roofing filter architecture of the K3 is very important for that reason. It can actually go to a small bandwidth. And we're going to demonstrate that now visually. And looking at the graphic here, that's 2.8 kilohertz, and you're going to see that shrink. And you'll continue to see the P3 Panadapter displaying this wider band, but you'll hear the difference in the audio, so I'll keep quiet now. Okay, what we just did was we down selected from probably 5 or 6 CW stations to pretty much 1. And one of the ways you know this here is that we can actually see the station registering on the CWT, which is it's a tuning indicator, and it registers the station at the same frequency as your pitch. So what you're hearing is the same frequency you're transmitting. That's how you know you're right on top of them and zero beated. It's an important feature for CW. At present, we've also got the sub receiver engaged, and that's indicated on the graphic here with the sub nomenclature. And that's helping us a little bit because signals have been a little noisy on 40 this afternoon, and we just went through a pretty great bout of noise, 30 dB above the floor here. So this is a very important thing now. If we go back out to and kind of zoom out, if you will, to 2.8 kilohertz, kind of hearing everybody. So that's a pretty amazing feature, and it's very important. One of the other things about the K3 that you may find interesting is you don't really need to run very much RF gain, and you really don't want to. To get the dynamic range the radio is capable of, you really don't need to run it a lot past halfway up. So that's this control here. And I don't generally run it much further advanced than that, but all the choice is yours. So as we tune the radio, now we're again on receive on CW, 40 meters. Right now we're in fine mode, so this is 1 hertz resolution, and this makes it very easy to dial in very precisely to different CW stations. And I'll keep quiet again, and we'll kind of drift across a few of them here. And we'll pick up one here and put them in a narrow bandwidth. Okay, so right now you hear a station calling the stations right in the center. He's not zero beated. And one of the things that's interesting here is that we're actually fairly wide right now at about 200 hertz, 250. Those stations are actually very close to each other, but notice all the stations that you see on the Panadapter that are relatively close in. In fact, I'll just make a quick change here to show you how close. That shows a 2 kilohertz spread, so it's pretty tight. And we're selecting all the stations out, the ones that aren't on top of this area here. We're listening to that station that's showing as the up and down. You see how strong his signal is. We're just rejecting everybody else out of the passband. So that's one of the redeeming qualities of the feature. Certainly at its price point, it pretty much puts the competition in the dust. Well, right now it looks like we're listening to County Hunters on 40 meters. And we're looking at the P3 a little bit more here now. It's interesting on CW too because you can spot signals. On sideband, it's different because you can actually tell the quality of a signal as well. And I think someday you'll be able to see your own signal quality, but that's just a wild guess for right now, meaning your transmit signal quality. So what you're seeing here between the K3 and the P3 is about almost a 10 kilohertz spread on the lower sideband, shown here to the left of center. You're hearing the County Hunter guys, and we're just going to kind of give you an idea why a Panadapter is so useful, also for sideband. As you adjust the span of the P3 up, you start to see more signals in a wider passband. There's no surprise there. Now we're seeing more and more. Some of them look like carriers, some of them look like sideband signals, and so on. As you increase the band spread on the Panadapter, you lose the detail, and you kind of would expect that. The display isn't going to get bigger to match. So, going back to the qualities of the K3, and again, we can keep our eye on the P3 as well, but as we go back to the K3, just pretend that we had a lot of outside interference here, off-channel interference, and we're going to fix that, okay? And the way you do that with the K3 primarily consists of shifting the center frequency and also lowering the bandwidth. Now what we've done here is we've kind of we've rejected all the off frequency noise that we're not interested in, and we got a lot of gain focused right at the gentleman from Mississippi. Okay, and this works very, very well. Again, the sub receiver is turned on and working. It's pretty effective on 40 meters with the antennas I have, and generally it's very, very effective on the HF frequencies with those antennas too. Sounds like our County Hunter friends are having a little fun here. Now that we've got our receive set up, I generally run it just about here. That's minimum intelligibility for me, but some people run it as low as a 1.5 kilohertz bandwidth in a contest situation. Works great too. You do have to shift your center frequency around to compensate, or you'll start losing the upper end of the voice spectrum, for at least for males. I think for females we've already lost it here. Moving to the P3 just a little bit. One of the cooler things about the P3 is that not only does it display a waterfall and a spectrum, but you can also have some programmable functions. In a contest setting, this is invaluable. And it's of course also true for the K3, but more widely known at this point. One of the things I use a lot, especially in some of the work I do with the military auxiliary radio service, is the peak function. And not a lot of people use this, but I think it's pretty important function. And what it actually shows us is for each of the frequencies being received in the band scope, what the peak received value signal strength was at each point. So it's a little hard to see in the video, but we're still on the plus and minus 15 kilohertz here. So we're seeing a 30 kilohertz range. And we can just as easily turn that right back off and go right back to our nice slow average sideband spectrum and waterfall. Another function that's used a lot, I believe it'll be used very, very frequently for people that want to demonstrate signal quality or maybe even capture their own someday, is called the freeze function. And using the P3 utility, you can take the freeze, combine it with the P3 utility, and download a bitmap file to your computer that shows the other station what his instantaneous signal looked like. Obviously, this is a snapshot. We can also do that with a peak value, with a long average, a short average value, and so on. I've shown you one here with a medium or slightly slow average value. And again, to turn it off, it's as simple as just pushing the same button. The reason earlier I turned on the labels here is so we know what we're looking at. We can also change the rate. The rate is excuse me, that function's changed. Okay, we won't do that. We can also change the way the display is set up in terms of what you're seeing for waterfall and spectrum. Now these are just functions that I have on my own personal labels here. There's also a whole bunch of them in a menu. And I will scroll through them very briefly. I hope that the video can see this. But there's probably, I don't know, 15 to 20 functions that allow you to set the P3 up the way you want it to. And this is the way I like it, because I don't like things set up out of the factory the way that the designer wants it to. And Elecraft has allowed us to pretty much customize this. So that's pretty much a quick view of the P3.
Anything that you'd like to wrap up and emphasize, or any other points you'd like to make about the Elecraft K3 in your experience of having it for 3 years now?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that are pretty important. The first one is the affordability. It's, if you look at the cost per feature, I think maybe you're getting the best deal on the planet. But moreover, you don't need to fully equip a radio like the K3 to get significant performance advantages out of it. I found this out 3 years ago. CQ Worldwide Sideband and CW, over which I worked 9 new countries using a K310 and a wire antenna.
That's at 10 watts.
That's the K310. It's 10 watts transmit, one simple crystal correction, again, roofing filter on receive. And I was amazed. It was, of course, a very difficult contest. There's a lot of big guns out there, but it's the same type of thing. If you're working a low power, you have to always be persistent anyway. But many times I never heard those stations before. And with the K3, it wasn't a slam dunk because there's lots of QRM around. But as you've seen in the earlier part of the demonstration, especially on sideband, and in this case CW is where I was having the most trouble, I could pretty much eliminate the competition.
Yeah, the old adage, if you can't hear them, you can't work them.
It's precisely correct, but more important, with the K310, I didn't have the other roofing filters, and so in many cases I also couldn't eliminate the big guns. With the the higher complement of roofing filters, both in the sub and the main, it's made it so much easier. Now, it's also not cheap, but it's worth it, and that's my opinion anyway.
Any final thoughts of advice to people that are thinking about building one from a builder's perspective? Anything that they should look out for or pay attention to in the kit building process?
Yeah, a couple. One is I found that it was the radio goes together very smoothly mechanically and electrically, and now that it's a fairly mature radio, there aren't a lot of new kit mods to do. That in the beginning we had a lot of mods that as we were finding out about things, every good design's got to have corrections from the beginning, or it isn't a good design when it's midlife. And we're kind of entering the midlife phase, in my opinion. So people that buy K3s now benefit from that past, and to me that's important. And then, for example, you told me you just bought a K3, and I've seen it, and there's not very much rework in it. You don't have some number of rework, either buys or do in the garage type of thing, and you don't have to send it back to be reworked. Right now we're seeing, I don't know, from what I hear on the reflector, it's getting real clean out there. And the kit builders, I don't know if they've been a majority. I really don't know all the statistics, but the people I've talked to that have built K3s have had zero trouble, at least as far as I've heard in the last couple of years. First year is always, it's kind of first time you, first time me. Everybody's learning about each other.
Yeah,
we're learning about how does Elecraft support us and so on. I think maybe the last point is Elecraft support may be the best thing about the entire company, except for their designs, of course. Okay, you call them, you say, I have a problem. I don't know what time of night that they cut off working, but it's not much before 1 a.m. and they seem to get up awful early. And this is pretty well known by now. This is not just my opinion. You can pretty much ask any Elecraft product owner and you'll get the same thing back. That's important. That's really important, especially with a kit.
Yes, it is.
So.
All right. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to show us both the rig and the brand new P3 that just shipped this week. I look forward to getting one of those in my hands hopefully pretty soon. I can't wait. But anyway, thanks once again for taking the time for the video. For more ham radio related information, videos, and all things ham radio, please visit the Worldwide Radio Forum at www.worldwidedx.com.